Hello and welcome to Eyes on Research, the podcast that digests the latest scientific innovations in eye research using simple and understandable terms. I am your host, Thales Guimarães, medical doctor and clinician scientist at Moorfields Eye Hospital. Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of Eyes on Research. I hope your week has been great so far. As usual, it is a great pleasure to have you here with me today. In this episode, we'll be talking about smoking and your ocular health. And unless you have been living under a rock for the past 3 years or so, you will have heard of the harmful effects of smoking in your general health. And this is because tobacco smoke has a mixture of over 5,000 chemicals, many of which are quite toxic. In fact, smoking has been associated with the direct causation or exacerbation of quite a few diseases, some of which are also in the eye. So I thought in this episode to go a bit more direct and to the point, discussing each of these eye diseases that have been associated with smoking one by one. And the first disease that we are discussing is age-related macular degeneration. Now, we have a full episode on this disease, so you may want to check that out. We just released it a few weeks ago. But to keep it simple and summarized, this is the most common form of permanent vision loss in individuals above 55 years of age, and thus it's a huge health burden. This condition affects the central and most important part of the retina that is responsible for our central vision, a region named macula. And this is quite a complex multifactorial disease, meaning that there are a wide variety of factors that can influence and increase a person's risk of developing it, from genetic all the way to environmental factors. And many environmental factors have been associated. Hence, we call this disease multifactorial. Amongst these environmental factors, smoking has been strongly associated with age-related macular degeneration via a few potential biologic pathways. The main pathway we believe to be oxidative stress. And this harms the retina, reduces the amount of blood that comes to the retina, reduces the blood flow, leading to deprivation and lack of oxygen to critical parts of the retina, such as the macula, resulting in cellular death. Now, remember that age-related macular degeneration, as the name suggests, affects this exactly central region called macula. And what does research tell us about this? Well, we know this for quite some time now with reliable data coming from multiple well-designed studies. If you smoke, your risk of developing this disease is at least 2 to 4 times higher than that of a non-smoker. This is associated directly with the number of pack years of cigarette smoking, which is essentially a measure meaning the amount of cigarettes one smokes in a year, highlighting a direct causation of smoking habits and frequency of smoking with the development of this disease. Interestingly, more recent evidence suggested that there's a temporal relationship and a reversibility of the smoking effect, which translates to the longer you smoke, the higher your risk, and if you stop smoking, your risks reduce dramatically. And this comes from a systematic review, which is amongst the most reliable forms of evidence there is. Moving on to our second association, and in the same ship of common diseases, let's talk about cataracts, the most common form of reversible blindness in older adults. This time is reversible. We have a very effective treatment, which is cataract surgery. Cataract is a degeneration of our own lens inside the eye that refracts the light onto the retina And it is typically associated with age as well, although it can also be genetic and happen early in life due to other environmental factors, such as, for example, prolonged sun exposure. Smoking is a major risk factor for cataract development, and the exact mechanism of why this happens is not completely understood. The most accepted hypothesis again is that the toxic chemicals that are present in the cigarettes destroy the antioxidant nutrients, which are believed to maintain the transparency of the lens, right? And this lens needs to be transparent so that it can refract the beams of light, the rays of light to the retina. Another very reliable form of study named meta-analysis was published in 2012 and showed an increased risk of up to 3 times in age-related cataracts in patients who smoked cigarettes. Another study looked at associations between tobacco smoking and early onset cataracts, which are the word that we use for cataracts that happen earlier in life. And you can define this by various ways. The authors of this study define this as patients who had cataract surgery before 65 years of age. This research shows that smoking has no correlation with early onset cataracts, having neither a beneficial nor a harmful effect on its long-term incidence. And this translates to there's no evidence that it may cause cataracts earlier in life. And this doesn't negate the higher risk of cataracts found in other studies, suggesting that smoke does not cause cataracts to appear earlier than they should in life, but it increases the odds of someone having cataracts later in life. So you see, we have plenty of evidence from different studies, and we can actually start to create some roads, right, that connects all of these things. That's how important research is. We have discussed age-related macular degeneration and cataracts, so now let's talk about glaucoma. It's another quite common degenerative disease, and glaucoma is a condition that affects the optic nerve and causes progressive funneling or constriction of our side vision, of our peripheral vision. So our field of vision constricts to a point where in advanced stages you have what we call tunnel vision. The link between smoking and glaucoma has been controversial, to say the least. But recently, several studies have tried to identify possible effects of smoking in regards to glaucoma progression, especially heavy smoking. It seems that the evidence coming from this study is still a bit conflicting, but there is evidence that smoking cessation in heavy smokers may reduce the risk of visual field progression. And what about, in another common disease, let's talk about diabetes, right? Just to clarify why diabetes, if we're talking about the eye, well, that's because amongst the most commonly affected tissues in the body with patients with diabetes is the retina, right? Is amongst the most commonly affected systems. And patients develop what we call diabetic retinopathy. And diabetic retinopathy, if not treated promptly, and if the glucose levels are not controlled, it can actually cause blindness. There also seems to be a link between smoking and the development of diabetic retinopathy. Another study that was a meta-analysis as well, and by the way, can you see the pattern here? Meta-analysis and systematic reviews are indeed the strongest types of evidence there is. And this large study found that the risk of diabetic retinopathy increased significantly in smokers with type 1 diabetes, which is what we also call insulin-dependent diabetes. Even though this risk was just mildly elevated compared to non-smokers, it is still important to prioritize smoking cessation in a disease that affects blood flow. And let's think about this for a second, right? We know that smoking hampers the blood flow, right? It causes a cascade of events. It liberates certain substances in the blood, and it reduces the amount of blood that comes to a tissue. And think about diabetes, right? Diabetes is a disease that causes changes in small vessels in the retina, for instance. So by introducing something else that's also causing oxidative stress and lack of oxygen, which in this case is smoking, it may complicate the already hostile microvascular changes in patients with diabetes. So even though the evidence is not extremely strong, it's still important to give your eye the best shot in case you have diabetes and reduce or halt smoking altogether. Let's move on to, and still in the in the same boat, right, of very common diseases. Let's talk about dry eye disease. And we have an episode on dry eye disease, so go check it out. It's a very common disease, given we live in the era of technology. So we are all exposed to computer screens. Our cell phones are in our pockets and we use them the whole day. And this caused a peak in the incidence of dry eye disease. As you may suspect at this point, there's evidence suggesting that smoking is associated with more severe dry eyes. And particularly the symptoms are more severe compared to that of non-smokers, as well as a possible association with smoking and the overall risk of developing dry eye disease. The exact mechanism is still unclear, but it may be as simple as the smoking gets directly into the eyes, causing irritation, inflammation, redness, and a whole cascade of events that leads up to ocular surface damage and dry eyes. And the last disease to which there is a direct causation, and it's less common, but it's the strongest one, by the way, is thyroid eye disease. Now, thyroid eye disease happens when the fatty tissue that's behind the eyes and the muscles in the eye gets inflamed. An example of what we call autoimmune disease. And this inflammation can propel the eyes forward and cause various symptoms such as swelling, redness, blurry vision, and pain. And it's indeed a constellation of symptoms. Now, the evidence for a direct causation between smoking and the development of thyroid eye disease is very, very strong, meaning that smokers have a much higher risk of developing this condition. There's a direct causation there. Similarly, current smokers are more likely to experience not only disease progression, but they are also more likely to respond worse to treatments. So the outcomes tend to be poorer. And all of these associations that we have just discussed are not only for cigarettes, but also for electronic cigarettes as well. And in all honesty, the evidence coming from studies analyzing electronic cigarettes is less strong. The only reason for that is because, electronic cigarettes are a relatively new thing. So most of the studies are focusing on regular cigarettes. Now, vaping has become quite the fever in recent years. And the main problem with vaping is that it brings people who do not like cigarettes to smoke. And it can be as harmful as cigarettes. But what does the evidence have to say about smoking electronic cigarettes and eye symptoms? Well, an article published last year in the journal JAMA Ophthalmology, that's the journal of the American Association American Medical Association, assessed the prevalence of ocular symptoms in patients who smoked regular, normal, old school cigarettes, for the lack of a better term, and in patients who smoked electronic cigarettes. And he found out that individuals who use both types of cigarettes, so the tobacco, the regular cigarettes, and the electronic cigarettes, had overall more symptoms than those who only use one type of products. And the symptoms reported were mainly redness, dry eyes, pain in the eyes, and blurry vision. These are symptoms typically associated with dry eye disease. And it also found out that users of tobacco cigarettes had more symptoms than users of electronic cigarettes, but overall, there was a higher risk of having ocular symptoms in users of either of these products. We know that electronic cigarettes have less toxic products, we all know that, but they still have substances that may harm the retina. If I could give you one suggestion, is to reduce smoking or try stopping it altogether, because it's not only harmful generally speaking for all parts of your body, but specifically to the eye as well, and that increases your risk of developing quite a few diseases, right? So maybe time to consider some lifestyle changes if you can. Thank you so much for listening to me today. I hope you found this episode useful. I should also say that a few disclaimers. We have social media accounts where we post very short videos about teams that did not go on to become a full episode. So visit us on @EyesOnResearch on your favorite social media, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. We have it all, so go look for us. Also, you will find the link in the description of this episode to our support website, which is the website that we use to post our articles. Now, please consider subscribing to us there. It is completely free, and we are using that platform as a blog. So you will see weekly posts about curiosities and trivia about the eyes and the vision, as well as hot research updates on topics that did not go on to become a full episode. So please do consider subscribing, and it's a little bit hidden. You need to click the three dots in the top right corner of the website, provide your email, and hit follow. In this page, you also have the option to donate or become a member of our family, which, although optional, is highly appreciated, and you get access to special posts and very cool things, like, for instance, suggesting themes for blog posts, short videos, or even full podcast episodes. Anything that piques your interest, really. So, consider checking that out by clicking the link in the description of this episode. To my supporters, thank you very much. You are helping keeping the stream alive. Otherwise, share the podcast widely amongst your family and friends, and make sure to give us a rating wherever it is that you're listening to this episode. Doesn't matter if it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or another platform. This helps us a lot, and it aids us in our mission to reduce the gap between cutting-edge research and the population. Thank you very much for that. Have a wonderful rest of the week, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye bye.